how we can set effective legislation and how we can mobilize necessary resources to implement solutions that benefit our community, ecosystem, and the economy. It's indeed a privilege to say within the 5 years South Sudan has surfaced and contributed a lot in addressing issue of climate change. That's why we are member to the UNCCC, and that is a big milestone that the government has done to see how we contribute to the global cause in addressing climate insecurity. For us in ADRNET, we call it insecurity because that falls within the element. As we all aware, climate change is a global issue, but its impact are deeply felt at the local level, and particularly South Sudan is experiencing that as most. And schools were closed for some time and then they opened today. It's because of the heat wave that we've been experiencing as a result of the crisis. These challenges are not just environmental, but they are social, economic challenges that threaten the livelihood of our people. Addressing climate change in South Sudan is not just a priority, it's a fundamental part of our national development agenda. By taking bold and urgent action now and involving stakeholders in finding a solution to address this global cause is an obligation that we need to do as a country.
Our goal is to ensure that South Sudan can access resources needed to build resilience, adapt to changing conditions, and mitigate the impacts of climate change. I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our partner ADRNET for their unwavering support and commitment to our cause. Our partnership has been instrumental in making this workshop possible in advancing our collective efforts towards climate justice. As we embark on this journey together, let us remember that our strength lies in our unity and collaboration. By working together, we can create a more resilient and sustainable South Sudan, where every community has the opportunity to thrive in the face of climate challenges. Thank you all for being here, and I look forward to the productive and inspiring discussion ahead of us. Thank you so much.
Climate change is real. Currently, if you see in South Sudan particularly, we are battling the impacts of climate change on the other hand, and the fragility on the other hand. We are actually the center of global climate crisis today. South Sudan, according to the Ministry of Water, has over 2 million climate refugees who have been displaced because of floods. We are experiencing floods for the last 5 to 6 years. So climate change is not just actually the talk that we hear, but it's actually currently happening in South Sudan.
And if the bill is there, next time when you're having workshops like this, you need to have that bill so that you cannot beat it every time and see that draft, how to amend it. Now, if you want things to be captured in the Constitution, it's the same. What are the important things? Or maybe by the time that bill was drafted, there are more changes in the country which have gone, or international which have gone very far as climate change is concerned. By the time this bill was drafted, the water level in Bentiu and the other side was not like the last 2 years. Are we together? When was this bill drafted from the ministry? Mr. Wani, when was that bill drafted? – 2011. Yeah, when water was not like that. Even the economic level of the country was different. Many things have changed far. Maybe that bill needs to be worked on more. So, this is briefly where I stopped. I talked about sector. You cannot do environment without other. Let me come it this way. There are other countries which use a companion. Like, there are apps which are related all to environment. you have one compendium. Like here we have the commercial compendium laws. One huge, and you have the one for company law, you have the one of this, you have registration of companies, you have partnership, you have all that in one, banking, negotiable instruments, and so on. You have it all. And environment is like that. You can't do environment totally in isolation. And don't overlap another also sector. Land. Use of land, acquisition of land can be environmental challenge. How do you use the land? For what? I think briefly that's what I could. Unless if there is somebody talked about plastics.
The gentleman at the back, he talked about waste management.
Yes, somebody talked about waste management.
And the legal framework.
Do we have a waste management act? Is there somebody who knows that there is no waste management act? I've contradicted myself in this question. There is no waste management act. So, when you be talking about bottles, you know that the plastic stays over 100 years. Over 100 years. Are we in the same page? Or am I saying my own science, mixing with law? Yes?
Actually, it was amended last two years ago, and it was still in the Ministry of Justice. And when we asked those in the Justice, they were like, it is in this directorate, and they were like complaining that they do change their laws are changed. It's like, we don't know, is it like the capacity is missing or something? We don't know exactly what's happening in the Ministry of Justice, but it has been amended 2 years ago. Yeah, and also I just need to add something on issues of waste management. So since with the absence of the law, because the environment law is combine all these things together, but actually the waste management is under the authority and jurisdiction of the state ministry, and it's under the city council. So with the absence of the law, it's like the mayor can issue orders to work on certain things.
State Ministry of what?
Yeah, I want to add something about plastic waste. Currently, we are doing a campaign on awareness raising and educating communities on sustainable waste management practice. Even on Sunday, we did a cleanup activity in Sudarfo. We clean the environment, we collect plastic. But the biggest challenge that we face is sustainable waste management practice. People can dump plastic anywhere they think. Like if you buy a bottle from the market or the shop, you just bring water, then you drop it anywhere on the street. And from there, if it rains, take it to the river. And it kills aquatic animals. It can lead to cholera, diarrhea, and typhoid. Yeah, so that is the challenge that we are calling on the stakeholders to amend that bill.
Thank you.
Which bill?
Let me just give a snapshot on the environmental bill.
Yes.
Last year, before the Ministry of Environment and Forestry team went to Baku for the COPs 29, we had a follow-up on the status of the environmental bill, which was returned from the Ministry of Justice back to the Ministry of Environment for some technical review, and it was submitted back. 2 weeks ago, was it 2 weeks ago, 1 week ago, we made the committee for environment and forestry in the National Assembly to know the status. The only challenge that comes in is this shift of change of leadership. Also in the parliament gives a vacuum to some of these policies or bills that are supposed to be processed. So, and then we made the committee for justice, legislation and justice. We made Dr. James, and of which James Majok, the chairperson for legislation and justice in the parliament. So,
in the parliament.
yes. So the whole call is for the civil society to join hand with the Ministry of Environment and the committees to add voice to this bill. We need to make a follow-up. That was even the support they requested from us. So I think from here we need to draw an action point to see that we follow up this bill and to know the status. I think it will be updated. In case of anything, we will also communicate back.
Not only that, for the Minister of Justice, we call in law, we say law changes. As time goes, laws also change. Minister of Justice, particularly this gazette area of gazetting and legislative drafting, like workshop like this, they're supposed to be here. Because you don't force something for me to write, I do not know. It is a new change. You're waiting. Laws are changing. You're going for this international conference, you did not invite Minister of Justice, particular directorate. So if you want the laws, especially the legislative drafting section, you need to make them be closer to you. The same knowledge you are having here, the new one Baboya was pouring here yesterday and today, they need that. Know that all the people who went to university went to different universities. People are lawyers, yes, you went to different universities. Like the university where I went, gender and the law was a subject. Another university in Khartoum does not know what is gender and the law. ICT and the law. You're getting the younger generation now. What is happening today? The cyber crimes. You're telling a lawyer who graduated in 1967 that what is cyber crime? Are we together? So we need to be together. Make them closer to you for you to succeed. The same for the laws. I would ask, even if you're gazetting, you're saying all these laws have to be gazetted, the one related to environment. You still first need an assessment. Which ones are the components? Which laws have components of environment? For you to establish what is the compendium under environment and climatic change. So you need an assessment as an institution. And then you can connect with them at the Ministry of Justice. They will tell you need to work together before you make it on the internet. They have a website, Ministry of Justice, they have a website also. So,
If it is true that they have gone for 12 months without pay,
yeah.
so do they really have the urge to push for some of these critical issues that need to be addressed, like maybe debating a bill or something like that? I think, I've not been to Parliament, but what I hear is that MPs just go there, less than let them walk around. So I think let's look at some national issues that are affecting this country. We need to work on how do we make institutions very strong. How do we build capacity? Because people will just play the hide and seek game, which will not take us somewhere. So we'll put effort, we'll put a lot of resources, but as long as we don't address some critical national issues that are affecting this country, I think it will really take us to a very, very point that will not give us good results. So to me, I think that we need to also look around the box and say, yes, this problem, but nationally, this is what is happening. We talked about the changes in government. Today you are here, tomorrow somebody is here, the other day somebody is here. So it's complicated matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Lady Justice, maybe you can respond to that and then we can close this session.
We close. I respond to that and we close.
Thank you, Lady Justice.
Yeah, I think what he has suggested is also a good idea. Let's be on the same page. You just put yourself into the shoes of those who are working in the government. What he has described is what is the real scenario. They have gone without pay.
It's not about payment. It's about priorities.
No.
Payment is a priority.
No, the language, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I know where his anger is. His anger is they would have prioritized other things than others, which has taken the money. That's what his anger is. But the truth of that anger before it becomes anger is that they have not been paid for over 1 year. You see? That's a challenge. So when we are working with them, you have to be conscious. I like my directors in Law Society, South Sudan Law Society. When they are working, even in the states, in the counties where they have understood what is happening everywhere in the government system. So they just don't look at and say, this $50, he doesn't deserve it. No, because they know that they are not being paid for 1 year. Even $50 is enough for that person. They will make sure they prioritize for them to succeed in the programs. So you will do the same, what he has proposed. As the younger generation and the others will continue to find out what is this problem, why people are not paid. While I was in the Ministry of Finance some years back, is it 2 years ago? We did something there. So that is another issue. Bigger vulnerability, which he describes it. The word is called what? Bigger vulnerability.
It's not there. Talk about all those related institutions that are related to environment. We still don't have them. And of course, we know that in the absence, there are a number of things that are happening that you can't take people to the judiciary and say, so and so has violated, and he needs to be, fined or need to be brought to your attention. I wanted just an advice to this forum. In the absence, I know there are also instruments that can be used. What can you advise the ministries that are here that in the absence of the law, you can use 1, 2, 3, 4 that can be taken to justice, for her to take law into, and execute somebody who has done something wrong. That's one question. The second is, I just wanted to bring, in this particular room, I know this is a very good forum. There are people that are, civil society activists here, but really when it comes to the ministry participation here, other than Ministry of Environment and most likely ourselves from water, not many are here. And I believe this is a forum where they will be hearing from, the civil society will be hearing from us, what is available, what is not available, and what needs to be done. You have said it very clearly, and this is what I was going to raise. The civil society should not only wait for calling us here, but they should also reach us. As already my colleague has talked about the vulnerability, we may not be able to reach out to these civil societies, but you have the ability. Why don't you reach to these institutions and support them in developing, what is there? The other aspect is do an analysis of what is already being done. For example, the Ministry of Environment has the environmental bill. We in water have the water bill, which was called from Ministry of Justice. We are currently working on it. See, are there areas that complements each other or it's being duplicated? Because one of the biggest challenges, even if these laws are passed independently, the implementation becomes very difficult because there is an overlap in terms of roles and responsibilities or mandates. So this is a role of the civil society to plug them out and say, yes, these laws are being developed by the various institutions. Had it been done in an inclusive manner, as stakeholders that we're talking about being involved in the process of developing this, are they going to be implementable? These questions, civil society has to help us because they are our voices. They are the voices of the people who they are representing. And this is really a gap that I see in the civil society. They need to push up their assault and be able to support the government because they're here really to support us in the government. Thank you.
Thank you. Because of time, is it burning? Yes. How burning is it? Okay, you get up, I have to control you.
Yes.
And I'm very serious about that.
Thank you so much, Your Honor, Your Highness, Justice. They use a lot of titles. We keep quiet because when the judge is around, The lawyers always keep quiet.
No, talk.
Yesterday I talked about specific laws are not available in this country. That does not mean we don't have a law. Article 41 of the Transitional Constitution of South Sudan talk about the protection. It also talk about clean environment. So any environmental damage, it is a violation of this article. So if there is a problem, especially with pollution in the oil field, an action can be brought to the court using this article. We don't say that there are no laws. We say that we don't have specific laws on climate change. But this article can be used to bring an action in the court. My question is, as a judge who has been in the court for several years, you did not tell us whether you have ever received any environmental case and solved. Because in most cases, cases are being taken to East African Court of Justice. But East African Court of Justice only receive a case if the local avenue have been exhausted.
Because
local courts are supposed to handle the case. And if there is a frustration in the case, that is the only option a case can be taken to East African Court of Justice. Just like ICC does not receive cases directly.
Submitted environmental related case to the Court of Judicature in the Republic of South Sudan. You have ever heard?
Personally, I have never submitted any case.
Have you heard? Here, no, leave East Africa, here, in South Sudan. You have heard?
But I'm very sure that a case has been submitted to judiciary. But my question
You know that lawyers don't guess. You have to say it happened.
Because what is the reason as to why lawyers are going to East African Court of Justice?
Now, let me come this. I don't want to speak political, legal argument. East African Court of Justice does not have the provision which says that you must exhaust the internal remedies first. Here, you know, it doesn't have. And it's the same complaint our judiciary had. Why our people were going straight to the East African Court of Justice. So the East African Court of Justice, the Parliament, the East African Parliament, where we have representatives here, we talk to them to make sure that that provision must appear in the Act today in the East African. There is no provision. But there is a provision for International Court or African Union. For African, yes, there's a provision that you must exhaust the internal remedies and you can appeal. Or else, if there is a fear, if you have reasonable explanation why you should go higher, you just fight.
Of course, there are conditions. They cannot just receive a case.
No, I'm just giving you an example. This is the legal stand now. We don't have it in the East African Court. So it is until your members of parliament who are here, who represent you there, you work through them. They should influence the other parliamentarians of East Africa to make sure that provision has to appear. First, remedies home, then you can appeal ahead. But now, as I stand, it's not there. So, but international court is there.
So your response to my question is that you have never received any environmental case since the independence of South Sudan?
That's why I'm putting it back to you as a lawyer in the market. Lacuna, which allows anyone to go there. And then complete, somebody mentioned about there's a fear of duplicating laws. Dear friends, this is very serious, by the way. And that's why you should not leave the legislative drafting. There are different directorates in the Ministry of Justice, but you shouldn't leave them. And when you are bringing, and it comes together also with the international, I see international consultants who do legislative draft bills. I've seen that reputation, the way he's saying in some bills, somebody is repeating which is something is in another act. It's because the person does not know that as a country we have this other law which is there. So duplicating it is not correct, but there is a way of going out, working in a close relationship, the Ministry, because they have all. Another thing is that Ministry of Justice has got more than how many laws already? Who has ever heard? Over 200 and something. No, it's more than that. Mm-hmm. So they're over that. So if somebody wants to help and put them online, as partners, you have discussion with the Ministry of Justice, how to help them. And
why did the environmental law delay since 2012? No? Mm-hmm. Why? There must be issues. I think we discussed with the Minister and other Secretary in Grand Hotel. We asked a simple question. You know something called B? You know B? B, which can save people.
Yes.
The question was asked, is the bee belong to wildlife, belong to the environment, belong to agriculture, and they fail to compromise? See, this is one of the issues.
Bees, Dubanase.
Belong to who? And because they fail to have the issues, they split it up to these line ministries. And I will request the Minister of Environment and Forestry, like stakeholders, to go back and check with other ministries. The same questions, justice, happened to the Traffic Police and the National Road Authority. National Road Authority said, who controls the road? We are the one. Traffic said no. Until they have now, they have no law.
No traffic.
See, that's why, if Minister of Environment and Forestry is very serious, go back and set your colleagues so that your bill can be pushed. And how you can push your bill? We said Nas Magali, Minister of Justice, Munukele. Because they are some civil society, they go because you are a member, example like Wani and other thing, you go to the Minister of Justice, why is the bill of environmental law? The minister says we don't know you, who are you?
You do right to official.
Which means you are supposed to go through the line ministry. Then you go as a team. As you go as a team, you can have a very big gateway for you to enter. The same to the parliament. And then my last advice to you. She mentioned something lastly about the duplication of the laws. We have some media houses here. I worked for 15 years in media. When you see South Sudan media law and our penal code, defamation is a crime, the other side is a civil. This is something.
Yes. Yes.
Defamation in penal code is a civil, but in the media is
a criminal.
What's out? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And sometimes we have to be careful on issues of, one, protocol, number two, the line ministries, especially like the CSOs who are working. You work according to your organization's theme. If it is related, the mandate is environment and so on, and then you move to the particular Ministry of Environment, and the Ministry of Environment together with its body will then request documents or enlighten you about how far things have gone. Number two, protocol also goes to the issue of institutions in a way that when you went as ops manager or a support staff, I don't know which grades name them, and then you begin to go to the undersecretary or the minister straight to ask for a bill, for example. It does not work like that. You will have to work through the main ministry institution, and then they have a hierarchy. You go with official document. If in case they have nothing, nobody to send with that official document, either from the Undersecretary or Director General, you go to that institution. So the issue of protocol must be looked into. Another issue is the amalgamation of institutions. It may not have come here, but I need to say it because I was one time a minister for legal affairs and law enforcement, seconded from the judiciary. And wildlife, it was legal affairs and law enforcement. So I had the state attorneys, which is Minister of Justice. I had police, I had prison, wildlife and fire brigade. But then wildlife was with hotel and tourism. Are we together? Not under law enforcement. This state is the first state which made an establishment order in the Council of Ministers to bring wildlife to law enforcement, which are the national, but then it was not, it was still with hotel and tourism. And today it has been emulated, local government and law enforcement putting wildlife inside with their colleagues who are holding the guns like that. Why was that important? Because we established that during the movement, most of the soldiers, people were soldiers, these law enforcement were soldiers. They didn't go to school much. Now the issue is, when you categorize police and you pick civil service under hotel and tourism, which means degrees grade 9 or are we together? So we have to bring them and protect them and put them under law enforcement so that they will be together with their colleagues. So you need to be wise and don't fight. Because you have seen a partner who is supporting this, I don't want this ministry to get this, and then you fight. No. Lastly, is that there's a spirit of tit for tat. You pay me or I. In the New Sudan, we had a different spirit. We could draft laws, 36 laws, I remember the one of 2002 or 1, 36 within a year. And it goes to the Liberation Council, which is like a parliament later to approve that. But today, people will take years, people are talking about allowance. So it makes people want. Now the worst fear is for the younger generation. Because if what you copy is what is happening now, so we are worried of tomorrow. I think, thank you, God bless you all.
The Minister of the Environment admitted at one point, and this is on record, when they banned the use of polythene bag, she said there are other big men in the government who continue importing polythene bag into the country. So it was above the ministry. Two, those very serious issues about the environment. We watched a documentary this morning. They have been exiled from the country. So how does the government address this? I know in the case of Pan-African law chambers, they had a case against the government of South Sudan. But the lawyer himself came on camera and said his life has been threatened, but the case has been resolved off camera, which we have information about it. Then he dropped the case. So those who really want to ensure that the environment is protected have been intimidated by the state. How do they resolve this issue?
But my small answer is, next time you invite the people who intimidate you. So that they listen. Thank you.
That was very insightful indeed. Yes, my brother. Please don't ask me a question. I do.
I have
a comment? A concern. Yes. Yes.
You need to be mindful because you are the moderator.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, we'll do much better. It's on the computer there. That computer. So we have, right now, we're going to have a very brief, extremely brief and quick panel discussion. And I'm going to keep this panel discussion to a maximum of 10 minutes. After which, if you've got questions, we're going to take a maximum of 3 questions, and then the panel is going to respond to the same before we break for lunch. I can see that the energies are low, but this part, this is a very, very important part of the say. Where's Mercy? Mercy, Sarah, could I please have some chairs up front? And what we're going to be discussing is gender inclusion in climate policy making and participation in climate governance. I'll say that again, gender inclusion in climate policy making and participation in climate governance. And to help me in this endeavor, I'd like to invite forward a lady by the name of Cecilia, the gender focal person of MOEF. Cecilia, you around? Cecilia? Okay.
Equality alongside climate action lead to co-benefits such as reducing poverty, improving social cohesion, and fostering sustainable development. Representation in all aspects of sectors when it comes to addressing climate change, in health, in education, in environment, in security, all aspects. So having that representation is key in terms of informing climate governance. Integrating gender considerations into climate solutions can help increase resilience and enhance effectiveness of intervention and promote long-term sustainability. In terms of gender-responsive climate policies, of course we look at international frameworks. International climate agreements such as the Paris Agreement emphasize the importance of gender equality in climate action. And it is the same also from the national policies, particularly in South Sudan. You look at the constitution, you look at the national gender policy, and you look at the Maputo Protocol, you look at the UN Security Council Resolution 1325, that look at more on inclusion, and the same thing also the South Sudan National Adaptation Action Plan and National Determined Contribution. All these are policies to see that we are very inclusive in our programming and in our engagement in terms of policy, in terms of decision-making process. Climate financing and gender, they're great intersection in terms of when it comes to that. So it's very important for us to have, if we are to have access to finance, one of the key barriers that we from our engagement is access to finances. So we find that we need to consider, if we talk about the level of vulnerability, we find it is very important that we consider vulnerability in terms of allocation, in terms of creating access. In the gender responsive climate finance, the international instrument like the GEF, the Green Climate Fund and Adaptation Fund, are examples of international, they consider the aspect of gender in allocating any finances. So that if we're even developing policies related to climate financing, we need really to consider that it must be inclusive and it should find the vulnerability for that particular program. So, if you look at the aspect of gender inclusion, is very important because it gives us layers in which our programming becomes very inclusive. When it comes to the policy, when it comes to legislations, when it becomes to law. Like they said during the review, when the women-led association developing the Women Charter, the aspect of environment and climate change became as part of that discussion. The reason being, it is very important to transform other legislations that are discriminatory. That's why the Women Charter defines one of the elements in that charter is environment and climate solution. So it's very important for us to do that, to have a gender-sensitive programming. Once we have a gender-sensitive programming, it gives an element to even fast-track our intervention. It gives us an element to test the aspect of our programming and our policy. It also defines quality in terms of that. So, being very inclusive in our process is really mandatory in terms of our program. And then the other thing is also to look at within the elements of barriers when it comes to gender inclusion. When you look at South Sudan, when you check the NAP, if you have the NDC, the aspect of statistics, data is very limited. That means there are limited literature that can inform us when it comes to statistical information.
Down in the urban centers in Juba, I had to request one of our staff for her to draft for us a presentation on gender crisis management related to water management, gender in water management in urban centers. We really came to realize, and we did a sort research, we realized the impact was heavy. And we happened to also seek with our sister partners to see if we can have a policy dialogue on issues related to urban water management and gender specifically. What brings to my mind now is, in regards to these policies, when they are passed and maybe when they are made, let us be more gender sensitive, that people with knowledge on gender equality can really help us in informing these policies to consider the other impact on gender. Thank you. Okay.
Yes, Doctor.
Thank you, Stephen. I think that was a wonderful presentation, particularly to take us back a little bit for those who were present at that time. If you looked at the structural adjustment program many years ago, and many countries ascended to that structural adjustment program, and there was a bit of a challenge in terms of implementation of that program because it lacks gender sensitivity in certain sectors, particularly water, as my brother mentioned here. It had a lot of challenge to implement that across the continent, actually. After that, the major program that we saw was the Millennium Development Goal. And Millennium Development Goal, as a country, I think we didn't do better. There were quite a lot of issues that were not even touched at all. Those issues that were touched on the Millennium Development Goals didn't reach 40%. That was below the expectations globally. And that, if you follow the UN Development Index report for each Sustainable Development Goal, and Sustainable Development Goals mention clearly on climate change, adaptation, mitigation, and so forth. Again, financing bit of it in gender inclusivity is still a gap. A lot of research should be done to probably streamline the gray areas, particularly when it comes to financing. It's not very clear whether this financing is coming nationally or is coming from international donors. With the impact of conflict that we see in African countries particularly, even within the region here, the East African region, there's a lot of pockets of rebel group and so forth. That limits the financing bit of it to address gender issue. Now, unfortunately, the responsible bodies are not in this room to ask this critical question, how we are faring in terms of sustainable development goals that tackle majorly on climate change, particularly financing. Thank you.
Yes, Honorable.
Good afternoon. My name is Longoko Luis. I work with a youth organization that deals majorly on the issue climate change. I was supposed to be part of the panelists, and unfortunately most of my colleagues did not make it, and that's why Mr. Wani took part. So, Wani talked about culture or traditions and climate change. It's one of the things that I was going to talk about. And I'm just wondering, what are the mechanisms that we can follow to sort of overcome these barriers that our traditions and cultures have put in place? Because as we all know, climate change doesn't know whether you are a man, you're a lady, or your culture, your background. So what can we do? What policies or mechanisms do we need to put in place to sort of overcome this? Thank you.
On sustainable farming. Let these women who are doing the 50s, 80% using the arable land know that when it's dry season, we can use the waters of the river to do irrigation farming. That is part of the trainings that they need on sustainable farming practices. That is an example. And then two is capacity building programs on disaster risk reduction. That there is agroforestry, for example. It can help you to manage floods in certain areas. And then also climate smart entrepreneurship for women. And another way to integrate women to climate action is economic empowerment programs that promote women's involvement in green industries like solar energy, water recycling, and sustainable forestry. Let me give you an example on recycling. If you look at the number of women who are making juice on the street, they use the bottles that we are having here, and that is one way of recycling, but that is the local way. If we can put women into recycling on a larger scale, then I think we can have something better.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity once again. I just wondered if you guys can be able to follow me without maybe everyone is supposed to be here, right? I think let us leave that aside. Let us think about we as civil society. We have a responsibility to reach the government in whatever way in the future. But as part of this training, the discussion about the gender and climate change or gender and environment should be tackled in this framework that I also want to talk about. Because we're not only South Sudan, right? Yesterday we presented some of the international frameworks. We talked about some of the COPS mechanisms and things like that. So what I wanted you to do as civil society, if you leave this place by end today, to begin to think about what are some of those structures that are more internationally, what are those structures that are more national in South Sudan, and what are some of the structures that are more local. When I talk about local structures, I want you to look at the national level, state level, if you look at the county level, look at the PIAM level, look at the Boma level, right? And then look at community level. There's also a new structure of local government, because local government is divided into two. We have the rural local government and the urban local government, right? The rural local government is the county, the PIAMs, and the Bomas, and the urban local government is the city, the municipality, and which are the structure? The town councils. Like for example, if you go to Nimule, Nimule is a typical example of an urban local government, which is the town council. And if you go to Juba, is a city, right? You go to Bor, is a municipality. Those are some of the examples. So you need to know the characteristics of those structures when it comes to environmental behaviors, right? And I want to offer this quickly. If you go and begin to analyze as part of the gender issues, you have to look at the impact of not involving both genders in terms of the impact on the communities. You look at how women and men are supposed to work in this field of climate change and climate financing, right? I also want to look at what needs to change. Let us not look about activities. What needs to change? Is it, and why is it not changing, right? The second thing I want to talk about is to do with how do you actually build collaboration? Because you cannot make mind shift without talk about collaboration, right? That's the reason why we have academics today, people from the university, to also give us some of the perspective from the academic side, and they're going to go back with some notes to even teach some of the students from the university in terms of change we wanted. But also I want to offer a few things in terms of understanding the gender dimension when it comes to climate change. Let us look at how do we conduct an institutional and community assessment. Let us look at what barriers exist. Let us identify some of those barriers. Let us identify ways of addressing them. So I want to talk about some of the ways of addressing them, of course, but I wanted it to be from an assessment perspective, because the context in Bor may be different from the context in Budi, right? Something like that. And I also want to talk about is to do with the human resource support, right? There is more better, right? So let's begin to look at what kind of human resources are required to do this job, so that not always one person doing that job. The second thing is to do with the policies and procedures. I wish I would show you some of the government policies and procedures. Analyzing some of those policies and showing that some of those policies have gender gaps, right, is key. Because you cannot go to a government without something. You have to go to government that place where you have reviewed this policy, and these are the few things that appears to not be gender sensitive, right? Something like that. So I think the final thing I also want to talk about is to do with the procedures that needs to be understood, the kind of human resource that we talk about within civil society and driving that processes, and also the last thing is to do with the putting in place monitoring and evaluation frameworks and this understanding and deciding the indicators. Because even now, right now, we have not known what is the status of the gender-related things in climate change, right? Is it 2%, 3%? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? Because that's in civil society. Those are the fundamental issues that you need to consider if you want to influence the change, right? Yesterday I showed you the national budget, right? If I go to the president today and I show you that the South Sudan budget is 1.6 billion, the Kenyan budget is 30 billion, he will be thrilled because he knows that this is evidence. So I think those are the things that I thought civil society was to be able to do, and then we'll go to government with a solution. Because the work of civil society is going to government with a solution. Thank you so much.
Thank you. In terms of climate, it varies from one individual to the other. And then that also takes a level of vulnerability at times is also defined by these same roles like gender and then the cultural barriers. So if you look at in terms of decision-making process, there is limited aspect in terms of voice when it comes to our setup in the society in terms of decision-making process. Let's take a typical example. In funerals, most men make decisions, not women. True or false?
You are right.
Why?
You are right.
So if we are all equal, why can't the women also stand and make that decision? And those are norms when it comes. Leadership, governance is not only at the political level. There is community, family governance. There is societal governance. So that inclusive cycle in terms of decision-making process is very important. So those cultures that undermines, that limit other people to speak is a challenge in terms of informing climate change. In terms of property ownership, in say land acquisition, this is still kind of. So those vulnerability in terms of male and female can influence decision-making process when it comes to accessing finances. The second aspect, in terms of our culture, you know, there are some cultures that are very positive. Those days, indigenous knowledge, they will say there are some tree species in other places that you are not supposed to cut. And your culture, or some leaders will say, you know, these trees, those days, even our parents don't cut. So you need to ensure that you don't cut the trees. It's not because you will die, but they need you to have wisdom of saying, these trees bring water, it brings rain, it makes life better, it teaches. But these days, even, do you still believe that they are rain makers? Do you believe they are rain makers? The academicians will say no, and then the traditional theorists will say yes. But these knowledge are very important. Those days in our culture, they say Google for harvesting. You know, once you have harvested, you store some food. And these days, if you check the storage that we have, some of the storage facilities are poor. That's why seeds get spoiled before the planting season. Because of the heat, the storage facility is poor. 2, it affects the viability of that seed to germinate. That means our seed banks are affected. 3, our culture in terms of storage, like only growing for consumption, we need to move a culture of producing for commercial purpose. That is also culture. So those norms that affect decision-making process or participation is something that we really need to work towards. And then I want to add to what my good friend Grace said, in terms of what can we do. You know, the poverty of the mind is a disease to any system of the society. Knowledge, information is power. That means we need to consistently create awareness and education to transform those cultures that are barriers to our society core setup. And with that constant education, that's why Nelson Mandela says, education changes humanity. Once you are informed, you'll be able to make a sound decision. Once you create education, at times education is not all about going to class. It's about knowing something. Okay? So training community, creating that awareness in terms of ownership. Like for example, cutting trees. We know we can do all that. A person who has not gone to school, if you cut these trees, you will not be able to have food. So it's very important for us to keep on creating awareness, to keep on educating the community about the impact of human being on our ecosystem. Typical example, just say cutting trees. Because some of this terminology, if you go to the society, they will not understand. So use your platform, your network, to work with the community setup to transform those cultural barriers in terms of decision-making process. Thank you so much.
Dominic once again from Climate and Environmental Action South Sudan. Well, we've done a lot of assumptions on the impact of climate change on gender, but however, being a statistician, I think we should begin to do the work instead of doing a lot of theory. We have in the room Sud Institute that deals with research. We do have the Ministry of Environment. We do have the National Bureau of Statistics. Can we have an institution do a research on the impact of climate change on gender so that we know the actual data? Because we only have the general statistics of 53% of the population are